Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of, Fusion Underground. This is actually our second expansion pack. And today I'm joined with a good friend of mine and special guest for the show today, Paul Baba. He's an artiste, and we're going to be talking about comic books. So Paul is actually drawing, writing, and producing his own comic book. You can get it off of Amazon, Amazon.com, digital sales right now, so you can purchase it and start reading it right away. And if you're a fan of comic books, I encourage you to do so. I've read the first book. He's working on book 2 right now, but I'm going to let him talk about that. And we're going to talk about all kinds of other stuff in comic books. I mean, we both are fans of comic books. We're fans of comic book movies, et cetera, et cetera. I know you have a lot of opinions about comic books, as do I.
Very
so. Paul, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and about your comic?
I started a comic about a year ago because, you finally have to just get up your butt and actually make a comic if you can complain about them all the time. And I have certain stories I want to tell. And to be able to tell the stories, I want to find a way to produce it that takes out the middleman of the production of publishing, printing, shipping. And with Kindle now available, it's anyone can make a book now, whether it's a comic book or an actual type of book, like Word book. And with Kindle Update or in Comixology, which is owned by Amazon also, which is Kindle's owned by Amazon. Yeah, these all combined allows anyone just to put your ideas out there. So I thought, in the technology as it is right now, there's no easier time to do it than right now. So if you have any ideas, put them out there. And if you get an audience, then you cut out all those other people who are trying to change your work. And as an artist, you want to get your work out there without everyone saying, hey, change this, change that, change this. You just want to get something pure out there and hopefully find an audience and get going with that. But
so why now other than the technology? I mean, you're reading comic books and figuring, let's go ahead and do that. Can you talk a little bit about what is it that you had to learn, or what was difficult about publishing in this kind of a medium?
It wasn't so much the learning part. It was a matter of just the timing, because comic books is a labor intensive thing. So when you have other things going in your life, you end up going, I'll do it tomorrow. And you just never get around to actually doing it. Where now I have the time. It's like, of all the different hobbies I used to have, I've kind of deleted most of them. Like, I don't play video games anymore. I don't have role-playing games as a fun little thing. I don't play miniature games. All these other hobbies I used to do that take a lot of time up. So I just concentrate on artwork. And with that, I'm just able to finish it, because if you can only do 1 or 2 pages a day or a week, like a lot of people are, that's their hobby, and they draw 1 comic page a day or a week. If you're doing 1 page a week, you're never going to finish a comics. You're looking at a year to finish 1 comic, and you're never going to have an audience. You can do a one shot doing that, but if you wanted an actual storyline of any type of length, people are not going to wait around for months at a time if you're not, Todd McFarlane or some guy who actually has a following. No one's waiting for you. Mm-hmm. Where now with the Cintiqs, where you can draw actually on a computer now, you don't have to put on paper first and scan it in. So you have a purely digital platform that you can do coloring, you can do everything all at once, and then just upload it straight. Because the program I used was Clip Studio Paint. Mm-hmm. It's made specifically in Japan for comic books, or manga for them, whatever. And with that, they literally have a button. You press the button, boop, and it puts you to Kindle and goes and formats your stuff, and you're done. There's no, I have to make sure it's the right format, it's the right size, it's the right this, it's right. No, it's a button. So, it doesn't get any better than that. Mm-hmm. And it'll format, and then it even formats it automatically for mobile and tablets, whether you're looking at your tablet or your phone or your, some type of mobile device. Just it automatically just goes, okay, it looks good here. Boom, you're done. So with that, what's that?
Go ahead. No, finish.
So with that, it just became this is the perfect time to do it. Mm-hmm. And then in another vein, the comics I'm seeing out there, I don't want to read, because there's this huge niche of people. These people who are making comics today, you have an independent group that are still making comics that people want to read, but mm-hmm. the big 2 and 3, which is Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, and Image, aren't making comics anybody cares about anymore. And they're changing the comic industry so much that your average person goes, I want to read a comics about superheroes. Well, good luck, because all the superheroes now just fight each other. They don't have villains anymore because the X-Men and the X-Men villains are all friends now. They all live on an island and they fight each other. Well, that's not fun.
Right.
So no one wants to, there's no one to root for if everyone is basically an idiot or like a bad guy.
Right.
So, and then so people are basically going, well, I can't find it with American comics, so I'm going to go to manga. And if you look at manga, it's very serial, episodic, almost soap opera-ish in the fact that you're just following the lives of these people, whatever they may be. I mean, they have cooking shows and tennis shows and volleyball manga. They have a manga for everything. And if we could just get that into America, where people are just like, we can just watch what like you would normally watch on a television show like Netflix, but instead have people interested in your vision of like your overall story, and you have a complete vision of what you want to tell as a story. I think people will get involved with that, because I think that the days of this is a one-shot 23-page comics that has no bearing on anything else that's going on, that's like in the long term, I think those are done. Because no one wants to read like Marvel's big thing is they have these huge get-togethers where they're like, to read the storyline, you got to buy 20 different comics. Right. Well, do the math on that. They're $5 a piece. That's not, if you're 10, that's not an option. You're going to go comic, PlayStation game. I'm playing a PlayStation game.
Right.
Because that's just so, but if you made it where they're cheaper, we've already on another form, we've already talked about personally between us is, I think they should dumb down the art a little bit, make it more simplified, so it's not just illustration, and put it out more so people get hooked on it. So they're like, every 2 weeks, there's a new comics coming out, and I want to see what's going on. I want to see what happens with Spider-Man. And end every episode on a cliffhanger, just like the old radio serials did. It forces you to watch them or listen to them for radios. Right. So if you had that type of comics, I think you could get people back into it. But if you can just skip 4 or 5 comics and nothing changes ever, I mean, that's not interesting. And in the same vein, I don't think it's interesting when you have to read the one storyline. Not only you have to buy X-Men, you got to buy all the derivatives of the X-Men, all the different every other comics out there that Marvel makes to find one storyline. Because what if you don't like those comics? Then you only get part of the storyline and you're left out of the loop. And I understand it's a marketing gimmick, but it's a marketing gimmick that's going to lose audience. And that's what this is all about is if you make a story, no one reads it, don't bother making the story. Right. Because there's nothing, without an audience, a story doesn't mean anything. And that's what I was just thinking.
And so you just decided to jump in there. Now, I've actually read, I know you're working on book 2 of your comic book. For those listening, the comic book is called Little Ball of Hate. And I love the premise about the book. For years, I've always been a big fan of, I've always been a big fan of mythology. But your book, you're pulling in elements of what I would consider more to be Western mythology. There's a lot of Christian themes in it. And by Christian, I mean more like angelic, the concepts of angels, demons, you talk about succubi being in the book and things like that. So it's got this it's well rooted in this, what I would call Western mythology. But it does take place in Phoenix, Arizona, which I find is quite interesting. But why the whole concept of angels battling in the world? What is it about that drew you into drawing this particular book?
Mythology has always fascinated me, and the way angels are mostly people kind of shy away from them. And I'm thinking the way I see angels is kind of like the old school version of they're basically God's messengers. And by the way, coming from a guy who has zero theology in me, right? So this is the funniest part. I'm a hardcore atheist, but I respect the people who believe in religion. I find their beliefs, I don't believe their beliefs, but I don't find them stupid for having those beliefs. So I'm taking the religion of angels and demons and stuff of that nature and taking it seriously, and then writing a story about a guy who literally just sleeps with a demon, is now stuck with her. Right. So he can't leave her. She can't leave him. She's not a good person because she's not a bad person as in like an evil person. She's created to do one thing, and that's what she's created for. So she has no choice in the matter of not being that way. So that's just how it is.
Right.
And then it's just a relationship of like what would really happen. Because I read a lot of manga where you have the demon girl, or I call it the magical demon girl, because it's like I Dream of Jeannie. You get the magical girl, and now she's like but most of the time when you see those type of girls, she's like got like this, like she's a demon, but somehow she has a heart of gold, where she's just like she's a really good person down inside. That's not really what a demon would be. A demon is a demon for a reason. And if you're immortal, and you can't literally be killed by mortals because you're immortal, basically, because you're created to do this thing, and you've been alive for thousands of years, humanity would be puppies to you. So they're not real to you. You don't care about them. It'd be like if we're just crushing ants around us. We don't care. But she's created for a certain reason, and to do that, she has to interact with humanity. And now she's stuck with this guy named Gavin because she slept with him and didn't kill him, because that's normally what happens when you sleep with them, is they kill you. So, and Gavin's kind of a special case also, which you read in the book, that he's not normal also, but he's not special in any way. It's actually, he's hollow. So there's a problem with him also. So it's just like a bunch of people who just have normal lives that have, none of them are like, I don't have caricatures of this is the good guy, this is the bad guy. They're just people living. They all make mistakes, and they all do bad things and good things. And that's what I find interesting, is the relationship factor. And then on top of that, you throw in there that there are angels. They're not angels in my world. They're not nice. They're not guardian angels. They help move the world along as what basically the God, what God wants them to do. So if you're in their way, you don't want to be in their way, because they're angels. But and they don't really interfere in free will, as in like, they're not guiding things like with strings or whatever. So that fascinated me. So I thought that would be an interesting play of making it based in that, instead of picking some like, Asian or Middle Eastern kind of well, actually it is Middle Eastern, but whatever. But some background that's not Western culture, because that's what I know. And I picked Phoenix because I know Phoenix. I've lived here for 20 something years, and it's just an interesting place to live. That's not New York. That's not California. So it's just, but it is a big enough city that things can happen here.
Sure.
But so many people were like, comic books always happen in New York, or they always happen on the East Coast. And it's like, okay, but there's other, or the 20 parts, like a lot of the, back in the day, they had like Gen 13 that took place in California, Southern California. And of course the artists never lived there. So they draw Southern California like it's New York. Right. And it's like, that's not Southern California. So I don't understand. So you just got to make it look like the place. Plus, I think if you base your stuff in some type of reality, not the nebulous like Gotham or Superman's place, I can't think of what it's called.
Metropolis.
He lives. Metropolis. Yeah. If it's just some place that no one really knows, for me, it's hard to get involved with it, because it's just like this. It's might as well say Camelot. It doesn't mean anything. Right. Where it's Phoenix, and the places that they interact in the comics are real Phoenix places. So like if you knew where they were, you could actually go visit. The Waffle House in like issue 2 is the Waffle House over here where I live, because that's what it is.
And so issue 5, they were up on top of South Mountain, which I like that.
So it's like South Mountain is really South Mountain. That's what it is.
Yeah. What I like about the book, well, there's several things I actually like about the book. I like the fact that the art is simplified. You talked about that before. You don't spend an exorbitant amount of time drawing stuff in the background. You do only when it makes sense, or when you have to move the story along. But for the most part, the camera is focused on the characters and what they're doing. And the other thing that I really like about the comic is there's an animated sense to the panels. When you're reading the comic, the action sequences, especially like there's an action sequence in issue 5 that's just downright brutal. It's a brutal battle, but it's drawn so well. There's a great sense of action going from one panel to the next, and how one panel sets up the results of the subsequent panels. How do you go about? I mean, is that a challenge to draw that way, or to conceptualize things that way, or have you just been studying this for so long that it comes naturally?
Hitting on the first point where you said that there's not a lot of backgrounds, and I believe that you should have establishing thoughts only in comics. That's what, here's another rant about modern comics. They want to be illustrators. They don't want to be comic artists. So, and your eye doesn't work that way. There's a thing called depth of field, which means you only can like basically focus on foreground, middle ground, or background. You can't focus on all three at once. So if you have like Spider-Man swinging through the city, there's no reason to actually draw the city behind him, because one of them is going to be blurry. Your eye doesn't work that way. And that's like if you see modern movies, that's why you always see like the CGI is phony, like for like backgrounds, because it's perfectly clear from right where the character's standing in the movie out to infinity. And your eye doesn't work that way. So if my theory is like, just like, and manga does this a lot in Japanese, which is a time saving thing because they're doing weekly comics, is basically you establish where they are, and every couple panels you establish what's going on around them. But when they're moving, you focus on the characters. And I simplified them simply because I'm an animation fan. I love Disney, their style of animation. So that's what they're very Disneyfied, with like the little bit larger eyes, the more expressive. Because if you ultra realistic people, like you think we have a huge range of emotions, we really don't. And that's why in like stage play, you wear so much makeup in stage, so people in the back row can actually see what you're doing. Otherwise, you just look like a little person up there. Right. So if you emphasize all the like the big eyes, the huge expressions, you can get that across. And that's what I was trying to shoot for this. And then for like the action scenes, I was just trying to choreograph it to where when you're just following it, it reads briskly. And it also allows you to kind of like, I don't like the normal style of the American comics, is where it's like, you know, hero comes against villain. They have this big monologue. They fight technically, but it's usually one giant splash panel of the villain or getting punched out by the bad guy or the good guy. Right. And then we just go, hey, he won. Well, that's no fun at all, because there's this huge buildup and then one punch and the bad guy's out. Well, that's boring. So I want to show a little bit more of like, especially because when you're looking at like, and the fight you're talking about is she's basically a little demon girl, which is like Isidore. Yeah. And if you have a human being and you're basically, for the most part, indestructible, stronger than a human being, your fighting style is completely different, which is literally, I'm going to grab a piece of you and rip them off.
Yeah, she does that.
That's what happens. Because she doesn't have to worry about being hurt. And she's faster than you. So literally, it's just like, I'm going to overwhelm you, and I'm just going to tear you apart. And where the humans on the other side are like, if she touches me and gets a hold of me, I'm dead. So I have to do everything possible to kill you before you touch me. And that's just, and it really comes in book 2 when Ball takes on 3 basic guys just hanging out on like outside. Mm-hmm. And it shows that they're on a different level of what they can achieve, just simply because they're just so much stronger and quicker than us. But on a side note, they weigh 115 pounds. So you pick her up, you can throw her across the room because physics still apply to her.
Yeah.
But so that was another thing I was trying to get to, because I always hated like superheroes. Like if a superhero in the movies gets hit by a car, they stand there and the car wraps around them. I'm like, no, you weigh 180 pounds. You get punted by the car. You might smash the car, but you're getting punted by it and you're going to go flying. And even if you don't get hurt, someone can make your life miserable by just literally just keeping you off balance and throwing you around the room. And that always kind of fascinates me, that you could have a fighting style, kind of like an MMA fighting style, where you just keep your opponent off balance. And no matter how strong they are, it's like if you keep them off their feet off the ground, they can't plant their feet, they can't really do anything to you. So I'm just kind of playing with these ideas to make it semi more realistic. Because I always believe in that kind of thing. It's like, if you're going to have fantastic things in your comics, you have one fantastic thing. Everything else has to kind of be based in reality. If you just keep having more and more fantastic things, your audience just goes, everything's fantasy, so nothing matters. So I want to keep something grounded, that when you're watching, you're like, okay, well, I know she's super strong, but if someone picks her up, she's off the ground. And I mean, you still wouldn't want to get that close to her, but still, if you're able to get her on the ground and toss her, she's going to be tossed if you're strong enough, because she don't weigh nothing. Mm-hmm. And that's what interests me. So it's a different kind of take on a superhero genre.
So what has been the biggest, has there been a big struggle for you in terms of creating the comic book on a regular basis?
The biggest thing I noticed when I first started it, I wanted a very, very simple system. So if you look at, because I kind of make an ash can, the first 25 pages was issue 1. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's very quick. I did the entire thing like in a week, because I just wanted to get it out there. And it was when Comic-Con was actually here. And I wanted to get it out so I could show people at Comic-Con something I did. So I made it really quick. And then the more I went with it, the more I was like, I can spend a little bit more time So it's just become a kind of an evolution of making them, all the characters a little bit more detailed, all the backgrounds a little bit more, adding a little bit more tones, because I do like the black and white look, but I
Hmm.
want more of a, not so everything just white with black line, to give it a little bit more depth and put a little more tones on it. So it's just a matter of, because like right now in issue 5, I'm doing hair. I'm toning all the hair, and I hate every second of it because it's just literally just coloring. But
Okay.
it gives it that enough of the depth of it to make everyone look different. Because if you just make everyone black and white, now you have, well, hair can be either black or white. Or if you have the tones, you can make different hairstyles. So you can, and it's easier for your characters to be differentiated. Like one of the feedbacks I had back from in book 1 was Gavin and his friend Matt have almost the same look, just have a little bit different hairstyle. And people were like, they look the same. You know, it's kind of hard to tell who was who. So I'm like, all right. So I changed Matt's hairstyle, gave him darker hair, and even colored Gavin's hair blonde. Instead of just making it just like the paper white, it's now a blonde color. So that way I can, because I don't want ever to people go, who's that? You don't ever want to be confused. You just want to go, that's them, that's them. That's why another reason between Ball and Isidore, who look exactly alike, they have piercings, and
Right.
Isidore has tattoos.
Right.
Otherwise, being twins and looking exactly like each other, that just becomes confusion. And I don't have the ability to go, that's like that she has purple hair, she has green hair, something like they do in, like, you know, cartoons. So this way it's just like I have different ways of, because they have different facial piercings. That way you can tell who's talking to you. And then once you get down, they do have different speech patterns of how they talk. But if you're just picking up an issue and just reading it, you need to go from then the visual. That's why they have superhero costumes. That's Spider-Man, because that looks like Spider-Man. It's just an easy visual of doing it. And it's just, as I said, I cut down, because in the first book I was doing bi-monthly, which was 46 pages per every other month. And then now I'm doing monthly. I cut it back to 26. And even then it's like, it always comes down to like crunch time of, I have like 4 more days and I have this to do and I still have the cover to do. So you just got to sit down and go, I'm sitting down and I'm going to do what I need to get done. So instead of watching a TV or instead of going out to friends with a bar or whatever, no, you're drawing. Sit down and draw. And that's just what you have to do.
So are you still having fun doing it?
I'm having a blast, because I mean, I've always had like ideas for stories in my head. Hence why I got into role-playing games back in the day, because I had a captive audience of players who played my story. So this is another way of just being like telling a story without the problems of actually having players with you. So
people wanting to go off and do certain
exactly. It's like,
things.
no, I don't want to do that. This is the story. so I have a story, and what's nice is and once again, since it's now the technology allows you don't have to draw it on paper, and you don't have to like ink it on paper and color it on paper and then try to scan and do all the steps. It's all in my computer right now. It's just on a Cintiq, which is a giant tablet you can draw on. With that, it takes all that stuff out. I didn't want the computer. What's also nice is back in the day, if you messed up on a Bristol board, you know, they used to draw them on 11 by 17 Bristol board, your panels or your page. If you messed up, you're busting out the whiteout. Which is a pain in the butt, because then the ink doesn't really go over whiteout very well, because it can't suck into whiteout, because whiteout is literally just paint. So you have that problem where on a computer, you can do all your panels and do all your thumbnails, which are just like little sketches of how your panel is going to be laid out. You can even finish your inks, finish your everything, and go, ooh, that panel doesn't work. And what you can do is you just, you know, select that panel, save it, just so it's or like you, or keep it. Just, you know, dot your eye like on Photoshop where you can make things become invisible. Just dot it so it disappears and draw a new panel. And if it looks better, you go, oh, I'll keep that one instead. And you just remake the panel. And it's so like you can like change stuff on the fly. So it's like that panel doesn't read very well. Or you have the problem where I don't know if you know understand what the 180 degrees is, but for the audience, when you're watching a television show, the 180 degree rule is that characters on the left-hand side stay on the left-hand side, characters on the right-hand side stay on the right-hand side. Right, otherwise, the audience gets confused.
Yeah.
Well, when you're drawing your panel, every once in a while, if you go, oh, I drew them on the wrong side. Well, with the computer, you can literally select them and flip them. No problem whatsoever. Where like back in the day with paper and pencil, it's a whole, you'd have to literally redraw that panel. And that just becomes another time consuming thing. Or you can go through and go, the character had this costume on. Well, in one panel, you kind of forgot some part of the costume. Well, you don't have to bust out the whiteout. You just go, I'll just erase and draw the costume right. Done. And you're finished. And stuff like that just makes it so much more easy.
I was when I was reading the comic, the first book, there was a drawing of yours, and I'm always impressed, right? Because I have no drawing capability whatsoever, and whenever I'm reading your book, I'm looking at the panels, and I'm thinking, wow, I know the guy who did this. This is really impressive. Like, to me, it's just that's a neat thing. But there was one issue, and I don't remember which issue it was. You have two people on a motorcycle, and it's just like one of the very it's not actually part of the story. It's just like you
It's
open
just
the
an
cover
art picture.
it's just an art picture inside, and there's two people, and they're sitting on, I think it's Izzy and Ball. They're sitting on the back of a motorcycle, and I was really captivated by, you're probably gonna hate this, but I was really taken aback by the detail of the motorcycle. And it's such a weird thing to focus on. And even after I was looking at it for about a good 2 minutes at that picture, and I realized, wow, look at the detail of this motorcycle. This is really good. And I thought, I can't wait to tell Paul about this, because he's probably going to think I'm, great. The one thing I don't really care about is the motorcycle, right?
Well, two things. I care about motorcycles.
I know that. Yeah.
So that's why but another thing is it's semi-cheating. Simply because what it is, I took a motorcycle picture that I knew of and got the dimensions correct, and then just filled in the detail. So I didn't have to worry about actually having it the right size, because I had a person on a bike in that picture, and went, okay, so the person has to be this big. And then after I got the person, and you can basically just put it on your computer, like in Photoshop. Mm-hmm. You do a quick, like, it's not really a trace. It's more of a dimension where, like, here's the wheels, there's the wheel. And then all you do is then you just take away the motorcycle, like the background picture, which is the real bike, and you can just fill in the details. That way you get all your proportions right. And I'm all worried about, because I'm not worried about the cars looking good and the bike. That's not what I'm focusing on. I want the characters to bring across what the characters are doing.
Yeah.
So if I can do anything possible to make those, that's the easy part of drawing. And then you don't want to draw like a lot of people in comics now. They'll literally take the motorcycle and they'll put a Photoshop filter over it and go, I'm done, which basically turns into a cartoony looking thing. But it's so detailed that your character down doesn't match, because it's super detailed. And then your Spider-Man who's sitting on, or like, Mary Jane who's sitting on it, she's in 11 head proportion, which means her head's really small compared to her body size, not like a normal human, because she's superhero proportioned. And it doesn't match anymore because you have to do too detailed of a motorcycle. So it's like you got to match your art styles. And so what I did is I just took the motorcycle and got the basic outline in it, and then just drew it cartoony-ish. It's still it still looks like a bike, has all the right bike features, but it's not 100% a motorcycle. Like I didn't just trace a picture of it.
Right. And that was the interesting thing while I was looking at it, because I was looking not just at the bike, but obviously pulling back and looking at the characters that are sitting on there. And I was just impressed by the way that all of it really pulled together. Because to your point, it was a detailed bike. It looked great, but it fit with the overall aesthetic of the book and with the characters sitting on top of it. And it looked like it's like the whole thing just came together. Nothing looked odd or awkward about the picture. And I just thought it was probably, I think of all of the things, it was the one thing that out of all the pages that I've read, it was something that just really kind of stood out to me that I found fascinating about that. So anyway, I
appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that I want to do, because you get into this panel grind of just like drawing panels of people like talking and moving and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to do those, like, they're just like set pieces.
Right.
So every once in a while you just kind of break free and go, okay, I'm doing a set piece. I just want to draw the person doing something. And it's a nice little break, because they're acting, but they're not acting for a point. Mm-hmm. So like when two people are talking in a panel, they have to be like, if someone's going, hey, what are you doing? You got to make them look like they're saying, hey, what are you doing? Not just kind of staring off into space, and then the little board balloon goes, hey, what are you doing? Well, that's no fun. Yeah. You got to make them look like it. That's why I believe like your hand should always, it's like there was a animator who animated, I believe it was The Rescuers, which is a Disney cartoon. Yeah. The original Rescuers, not the Rescuers. Two Little Mice. And the villain is like an older lady.
Bianca and Bernard.
Yeah. But I don't remember what the old lady's name is, but when the animator was talking about, like, she was supposed to be doing like this monologue, but to make it more interesting, what he did is had her like looking like she's taking off her makeup in front of a mirror. So she's got like
Oh,
eyelashes.
she's
She's
pulling the
pulling off.
eyelashes off.
Yeah. And as
Yeah.
why she's, so it's like,
Yeah.
even though she is telling you everything you need to know, it's not just her making a monologue. It's her like doing something else. And that's
Right.
like in the one when Isidore's explaining to Gavin what Gavin truly is and why he's strange. I didn't want them to just be sitting at a table and her just like having this like, I'm going to stand on my soapbox and explain it to you. No, she's like, they're eating, then she's doing dishes in front of the
Yeah.
counter. I mean, it's just she's doing something else because most people don't just stand and discuss stuff. They're always doing something else while they're discussing.
Good
And,
point.
and that just that little bit of like interaction, it keeps you kind of attention. Because even in like in this last issue I did, that has a whole in issue 2, there's a whole background where Isidore explains to Gavin what Ball has done in her life. And I didn't want just the giant word balloon of like dialogue vomit. So while this is going on, something else is Ball's doing something in the background that you're reading also. So it's like as she's doing something in the background, they're discussing it. So it gives you something else to look at. And because I always hated, like, as I said, the dialogue vomit where it's just a massive amount of like, I don't know, they're called info dumps, where you just dump a bunch of info on you and you just kind of go, oh, okay. But I have just two heads talking. And that's a big thing now in comics. They do 9-panel like grids of some guy talking to the reader, of just like the guy's just head talking to the reader for 9 panels. And I'm like, first of all, as an artist, kill me. I don't want to draw 9 heads of just guy talking to me. And then as a reader, you just go, okay, well, that's not exciting. That's the epitome of not being exciting. So it's just not. Might as well make one giant head and all the word balloons instead of
on one paper, on just one gigantic panel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just cut out the middleman. But I mean, now it's a lot easier because what he'll do is they'll just make one guy talk like head, multiply it times 9, and just tweak it a little bit in every frame. So he's doing something a little bit different. And they with computers you can do that.
Well,
but
and
as a reader,
it seems like such a waste of the medium too, because the comics are such a great way to produce a visual medium with a very low budget compared to television or movies. And then so when you see a page of like you said, 9 panels of just a talking head right there, it's like, well, what a waste of the medium.
Yeah, and there's rules to making comics that I don't think not really rules. They're like, it's kind of like storyboarding. Like when you're making a movie, there's ways to make a scene interesting, and then there's ways to make a scene boring. Well, to make a scene interesting, you can't just have like the medium shot, lots of medium shots straight on with just a guy blah blah blah, because that doesn't show enough information. But if you mish up your panels with some like long shots, I don't really like long shots because they look lonely to me. And unless you're establishing something, people walking very far away talking, there's no feeling for me to it. So I like either like close up, and I love extreme close ups when someone's trying to make a point, like an eye or a mouth or something talking, because then you get that kind of like red rum from Rosebud, that type of thing. So you get that super close up, and that hits the impact home to where you go, okay, I'm interested in what is going on, because you keep varying the artwork. So it's not always just this medium, like I'm a full character. And I tell people, because like I've talked to other artists and stuff, when I look at their comics, I'm like, if you look at your comics and you go, would this ever be on film the way you're drawing it, where everyone, you can see their top of their head all the way to the bottom of their feet? If you look at most films, there's no scene ever where they just like pretty much walk across the screen where you see the entire person. Unless you're trying to prove they're walking somewhere.
Yeah.
But as soon as they start talking, it's a medium shot or it's a close up. It's a distort. Because you want to identify and you want to see the eyes, because the eyes show emotion. Your eyes and eyebrows are where you get a lot of your emotion. So you want to see that up close. And then and stuff like that just makes you more invested in the characters. And that's why you can have kind of like normal looking people in a comics that doesn't have like the superpowers or whatever, and you can still be interesting. And that's how another reason why I think manga gets it right where American comics don't, because American comics is more worried about the superficial. Like he looks like the Hulk, he's superficial. Where in manga, I mean, I've read comics where all the characters, there's probably 15 of them. If you took their hair away, they're the same character. The hair is the only difference between them. And luckily you have the hair. So you can tell that that's one character and that's another character. But when they actually start acting and start talking and stuff, you get to see the difference in the people. And that's how you get that emotional build from it.
So let me ask you this. You know, in media studies, media scholars and such, they always like to talk about how when there's a new text, whether that text is a movie, a book, you know, television, or etc., that there's always something imprinted onto the text by the creator themselves. And I think that's part of the, for good or ill. I think that's part of the problem with modern day comics. I think too many auteurs will imprint their own personal beliefs and everything onto the comic in a way that is very loud to the reader. They print they basically imprint their politics or their various beliefs about certain things right into the comics and almost spoon feed it to the reader. You're not really doing that with this particular book. You're staying away from comic books, or you're from politics. You're staying away from politics and all of that. And when I'm reading the pages, I can't help but think, where's Paul in all of this? So do you feel like are you Gavin, or are pieces of you Gavin, or other characters, or do you
Um,
see that in your work?
no, I'm none of them. Because
Okay.
I don't believe you should write yourself in your own story. And I don't believe it's helpful because too many people write themselves as the what they think a hero should be, or what
Hmm.
the protagonist should be is basically me. And I don't like that because there's certain things like with everyone, we all have kind of a normal, what do you want to say it, like kind of a generic way of acting around people. Humans are humans,
Hmm.
but you don't want to put yourself and go, I think like too many people, they'll make their superhero character who's basically Superman for all intents and purposes, and they make themselves. I think that's very disingenuous. I think you should make it somebody else and then try to write how that other person would act. Because if that other
Hmm.
person acts, if you can figure out how the other person acts and you get enough of their personality worth going, it's kind of like that old thing, like, I think authors say it all the time where if you write your good characters well enough, you don't actually have to write them anymore. They act the way they act, and the story writes itself because you
Hmm.
don't have to say like, this character you don't have to actually think that the character would do something if this reaction happens, because you just know the personality would see they would do that. So it becomes a lot easier when you just don't write yourself and you just write other people. Because I mean, all my characters have like a small bit of people I know in them,
Hmm.
but none of them are actually. I just don't go like I have a friend, a couple of friends. His name is Richard, and like I have some of his personality when he's drunk in one of my characters, but it's
Okay.
not. But other than that, that character is not him anymore. So it's like
Okay.
and then certain
Okay.
things that happen, like that kind of like the not the bar like the bar fight that Gavin gets into with the
Hmm.
guy that hits on Ball.
Hmm.
That happened. I was sitting right next to it when it happened. I saw a guy go to the restroom, and a dude literally sat down right there and started hitting on the girl. And I was like, that is ballsy. I don't even know how you have that much, but
Right.
I saw it happen. So it's like stuff like that will happen. And then the excuse of like the guy coming back, the guy literally just went, no, sit over there. I'm here now. And I was just like, really? And I'm like, that would be, it's something that happened in real life that you'd be like, that's never would happen in real life. But it did. It happened right next to me. So a
I
lot
was
of the
going to say,
stuff that happened,
well, I was going to say, people might read that panel, they might read that part of the book and go, well, that wouldn't happen. But here you are saying, no, that actually happened. I
yeah, it
watched
straight up
it.
happened. Now, they didn't get into a fist fight, but they got to where the point where the bouncers had to come and break them up and threw one guy out.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I'm
You
like,
just blemished
yeah,
that last
literally
part.
the
Yeah.
guy walked into the restroom, which was like the restroom was literally 4 feet behind him. The door was. So the guy turned around, walked into the restroom, and this other dude walked over, sat down in his chair, and started talking to his girl. And I was just like, wow, that is a different type of human that I don't understand, but it's gonna be in the comics of mine. So stuff like that's interesting to me, and that's why I said it. So I take things that have happened around me
Uh-huh.
and I put them in the book, and then and then and I write for all intents and purposes like Ball and Izzy. If you describe them as a human, they're sociopaths, but they're only sociopaths to us because they don't care about anything. Because they don't care about humans because they have a job to do. They were given a job to do. But other than
Hmm.
that, when you're immortal and everyone else around you that's human is going to die within like 90 years max,
Hmm.
they don't care. It doesn't affect them much. So when they don't care about people, you get that unfeeling of like, if they kill someone, they don't have any feeling toward that person they kill. And it's not because they're well, they are monsters, but it's not because like you would say they're humans like they're monsters. It's because they're not human. So they
Right.
don't have that same type of feeling. So that's a different way of a just different way of writing. So when I write them, it just always comes down to their underlying is this to them is all temporary. It all can go away, and all, like wealth, everything, their house that they live in, it's all just temporary. And since they don't eat, they're demons. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't do anything. Like they don't have any biological function per se. If you took everything away from them, they just go to a different place and start over, and it doesn't bother them whatsoever because they can't. I mean, it's there's no end goal for them. They're just there to do a thing.
They're just there following their own natural way of being.
Yeah, they're basically a lion or a tiger. They're just doing their
Yeah.
thing, and humans happen to be their prey for the most part. And then,
So what comes next for you? I mean, in terms of this comic, or do you have any other types of comics that you want to create after you're done telling this particular story, or how long is
um,
this story going to go for?
well, this story it's going to be in books, and each book is going to be like between 200 and 250 pages, somewhere around there. There's going to be
Mhm.
5 books, and there's a definite ending to this. So all my stories I tell, I usually know the ending before I even start writing, because I
Okay.
know how because it's a story I want to tell from beginning to end, and then all the fiddly bits to get there is another issue. But I don't have that ongoing thing of where this character is just going to be around forever, because that's not the point of my stories. So after this, I do have a couple other stories I want to do. Some are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter. And this really kind of started out as I want to make sure, because I got the new program that I'm using, that Clip Studio Paint, and I want
Hmm.
to make sure that everything was like before I started like this massive cool tomb of the great American novel. I want to make sure I knew how to use the program. And then this kind of just took off as I have a story to tell with them. And I've been bumping around this story in my head for years,
Hmm.
because I just always found that funny that, as I said, the guy gets the genie in the bottle, and it's usually the guy is like some doofus who can't get his stuff shit together, who the entire world he's just kind of a loser, and this girl comes along, and you know and he doesn't know how to act, and he's nervous, and she's like super authoritative and all, and that doesn't interest me. It's like, what if a normal 25-year-old got like basically a genie? You know, Gavin's not a good guy. He's not a bad guy. But I mean, he's a normal 25-year-old who lives a 25-year-old life. He drinks, he drives, he goes to work. He doesn't drink and drive at the same time, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is he is a normal human being. He's had girlfriends. He has a life. He has a career. And then like, so what if he got someone, and then take into fact that the genie he gets is not just, hey, how can I serve you? It's no, you're stuck in my world. I'm going to drag you around because you can't leave me and I can't leave you, but I got things I got to do also.
Yeah.
So, and then they can't be apart for very far. So it's just like, and that with that dynamic, I just wanted to see where it go. And then I have an ending where it's going to be, I mean, there's a definite ending to it. You know exactly what's going to happen. And once I'm done with that, I have a couple other stories. I have a story of, I have an afterlife story that like deals with actually dying and being in the afterlife, which that's going to be something I'm still working on. But I have a science fiction story I know I want to write and draw, which is going to kill me because I hate drawing spaceships, but it'll work somehow. And so, but there's these stories I have, and for the most part, they're just kind of plays on old tropes with a different look to them. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to tell my story of like how it's a little bit different in the way I talk,
Okay.
and that's what I'm looking for.
So you're in book 2 right now with Little Ball of Hate. How many more books do you have
Three.
to publish? Three
There'll
three
be
books
three
total.
books. Yeah, it'll be
Three books
5 books
total.
total.
Okay.
So and that's the arc, and you'll see it kind of start picking up in book 2 of like how like the little bit more of what's going to be like the other factions, because like there's I kind of allude to there's these other factions in this world of like the demons and like the warrior the human warriors are trying to kill. So there's all these other factions, but they're not really part of it because they've just kind of went, we don't care about that, because once again they don't,
Hmm.
as those two individuals. But there's this whole other faction of succubi and incubi and muses that are all part of these different factions that do stuff. And then just kind of like, and I always think you should have started comics like very small and build to the big things. And that's what this is. It's going to be building to more bigger stuff. Because if you just kind of go, you throw like your superheroes down on the ground to go, and they're part of this multinational force, and they're fighting the invasion of whatever from a different galaxy, the reader just goes, oh, okay, I don't care. It's just too much. But if you start off with like Like if you had a hero who had to go through the academy and then learns about the invasion and then meets them once in book 1, and then in book 2 he finds out the full version of the invasion, and by book 7 you're blowing up planets, now we're talking. But if you start blowing up planets on book page 3, well, now we're bored, because where do you go from there? You got to build it.
Right. We talked about that with the Wonder Woman movie, the way that ended. Thoughts aside, but it had kind of a big ending, and almost too big for the character, I think, especially for the first movie, because now it's like,
Yeah.
well, what happens now? Like,
Well, worse than that is Aquaman. That's even worse.
Oh gosh,
Because
Aquaman
he's got
yeah.
literally an army and of like a Godzilla creature that he controls, and it's just like, okay,
it's like, I now rule the world.
Yeah, it's like you can, or even like Shazam. Shazam should not got his, what is it, 12 other brothers and sisters or whatever.
Yeah,
that should be that should have been movie 2. Movie
right.
1 should be him rising to the occasion, not having to have help with all this family.
Right, because now it's like, where do you go?
Yeah, because now, first of all, as a movie company, now you got a bunch of kids that all have to be in the next movie. Otherwise, you'd be like,
right.
Hey, what happened to the little girl that was in? Yeah, we recast her. She's not in the movie no more.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, whatever.
Well,
so like,
and I feel like the Avengers kind of did that when, the first Avengers movie, right? They had the big alien invasion that they saved the Earth from, and then in the subsequent ones, they had to bring in Thanos. But I felt that the third movie was kind of a letdown in terms of its scope, because I felt like we already knew how it was going to end. You knew, and so I felt like it was the stakes were so high that it was almost to the point of, I don't care anymore. I know I'm probably the minority. War? Yeah.
Okay, I did, because Endgame I didn't like at all. Endgame was just too drawn out.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, Endgame. I'm sorry, I'm confusing the names. So the last Avengers movie, the very last Avengers movie.
Endgame, I think they wrote themselves into a corner and went, "Oh shit, how do I get out of this?" Time
right.
travel.
Well, and the big problem that I had with like Endgame, for example, was it was an Avengers movie, but it was really an Avengers movie starring Guardians of the Galaxy. Because the Avengers, I just felt like the Avengers had a very minor role in the whole.
Here's the biggest problem also you have with the Avengers. It's like the same problem I have with like the Justice League in the grand scheme of things. It's like, let's see, the Avengers is made up of Tony Stark, who has an iron suit. Technically, big deal. You have a super soldier. Okay, he's a little bit stronger. And then you have Thor, who's a god. Who does not belong in this group?
Right.
Okay, one of these people is a little too underpowered. And then we have like Wanda, who's really super powered. So it's like, and it's the same problem I have like the Justice League. You have like Superman and the Mighty Martian guy and all this. And then you have Batman. He's a dude.
Right,
but
right.
He's just a dude in a suit. It's like, no matter how smart you make him, one punch,
he's still a dude
dead.
In a suit. Right.
Yeah,
he's still
so
a
it's
dude
like,
in a suit.
So he doesn't fit. And that's the problem I have with the Avengers. When they start putting everyone, like you put all those Wakandans and then all, you put all, it's like, some people don't fit in this group of like fight, because the monsters can't be too bad, because then you just wipe everyone out. But all the lesser people, but they can't be too weak. Otherwise, Thor's like, okay, what are we doing now? I mean, what do we do next?
I'll just throw it into the sun and be done with it.
Yeah, so it's like you got a weird balancing act. And Endgame was just, it was too long, and it was too nostalgia of trying to show like the other movies and time travel and stuff. I was like, And I truly believe they ruined, not so much Iron Man, but I think they really ruined Steve Rogers' character. Because when he goes back in time to live out his life with Peggy, you're telling me through all the Korean War, the Vietnam War, all the civil rights stuff, he just went, nope, not part of any of this.
Right.
I'm forgetting all my, I'm out. And also no one noticed that Peggy now is mysteriously just disappeared and now married to some dude that looks just like Steve Rogers, but it's not him. This makes no sense. It's just like, okay. I think they mishandled his character as Captain America, stand up for good no matter what. And he just went, oh, I'm checking out of humanity and becoming a farmer. Yeah, that's not a thing.
Right.
He couldn't do that.
The Steve Rogers, I know, could never have done that. And I think that was a way for them to get rid of the actors. I think the actors themselves were done. Not that you have to do that. I think that was just a way to really solidify that these characters are done and not going to come back. A la James Bond kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's two things. I think their contracts are up. So and what's his name? Robert Downey Jr. hasn't had a contract in ages, so he
Right.
gets like $50 million a movie. They did not want Chris Evans and Chris Helmsworth to do the same thing and start getting millions upon millions per movie. They just went, okay, we're just getting new heroes.
Right.
Plus, they want to introduce a bunch of new heroes that unfortunately no one cares about and make them the new hot stuff. And it's just like, I guess you can try, but you kind of shot your wad with Endgame, and now we're just like, okay, now what?
We should do another one of these, because I would love to just simply talk about all of these extra these Marvel movies and where they go from here, the movies that they are trying to make, and are they interesting? I think that would be a fun conversation. So for people listening, where can they go to find out more about your art, your comic book, and all of that? Where can they find you?
I have a website, littleballofhate.com. And also, if you just do a search on Amazon Kindle, Little Ball of Hate, it will come up. Book 1 and 2 is combined, because book 1, as I said, is an ash can. So even though it says book 2, it has a bonus of actually having book 1 on it also. So it's just kind of a compile of both of them. And as I said, the first book, each chapter, because it's book 1, chapter 1, book 2, or chapter 1 type stuff like that. So the chapters in book 1 are all 45 pages, and then the chapters in book 2 are all 25 pages. And then their costs, obviously the 45 are more expensive than 25, because 25 I think you should not pay the same price for.
Right.
And I try to make them as cheap as possible, because I like the 99-cent hamburger theory. The cheapest you can make them to get your more audience in there, the happier I am.
Yeah.
But definitely. Unfortunately, Kindle, they have a minimum. You can't just charge 99 cents on Kindle. They don't allow that. Otherwise I would, but they don't.
And when does the next chapter, you said it's coming out monthly now, when is that one supposed to
usually they come out on the 16th of every month.
16th?
Yeah.
Okay, so
you're
just a
looking
few
at
more
Tuesday
days.
Yeah.
Okay,
so that's what I'm finishing up right now, is the final, like doing a quick edit, because after you read something so many times you don't see the mistakes anymore, so you got to keep reading it. It's always fun.
Well, thanks for coming on and at least talking about your book and talking about comics, and I'll definitely have to invite you back, and we'll talk more about Marvel and DC and whatever else is going on in your comic book.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. On behalf of Paul Baba, I'm Manuel Ramirez, and this is our second expansion pack. So we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.